What happens when revenge leads to an unexpected sacrifice? Can one animal's search for justice bring peace or destroy everything he holds dear? In a secluded forest, a loyal horse, raised by a hermit, faces a deadly lion whose tyranny has gripped the land. After a tragic encounter, the horse is consumed by guilt and seeks revenge. But what happens next will shock you. Stay tuned to discover the heartbreaking journey of this horse, his ultimate act of redemption, and the powerful lessons on justice and sacrifice. If you're moved by this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with others. And make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories that tug at your heart and leave you questioning the true meaning of justice. In the middle of a quiet, ancient forest, far from any human towns, lived a hermit. His life was simple and peaceful. He spent his days in prayer and meditation, far away from the noise of the world. But he wasn't completely alone. With him lived a beautiful horse. This horse wasn't just a pet. It was family. The hermit found the horse as a young foal, abandoned at the edge of the forest. Since then, the two had been inseparable. The horse was no ordinary animal. It was strong, smart, and full of kindness. Its shiny brown coat caught the sunlight that peeked through the tall trees, and its eyes were deep and calm, almost as if it understood everything the hermit said. "You are more than a horse," the hermit would whisper as he gently stroked its mane. "You are like a son to me." And the horse understood. It stayed by the hermit's side, helping him every day. It would wander the forest to gather fruits, herbs, and fresh water, making sure the hermit had everything he needed. The horse wasn't just loved by the hermit. It was also friends with many animals in the forest. The monkeys liked to ride on its back, laughing and playing. The rabbits hopped around its feet, feeling safe when it was near. Birds of all colors sat on its back, singing cheerful songs. Even the wild dogs followed it around, wagging their tails. All the animals trusted the horse. They knew it was kind and brave, a true protector of the forest. But not everything in the forest was safe. At the far end of the forest, there was a pond. The water sparkled in the sunlight, but the animals feared it. The pond was ruled by a lion, a powerful and fierce beast. The lion was the king of that part of the forest. His golden mane made him look even more dangerous. When he roared, the sound shook the trees, and no animal dared to go near the pond when he was around. "Stay away from the pond," the monkeys often warned. "The lion is cruel and shows no mercy." But the pond was important. It was one of the only places where animals could find water. So, even though they were scared, they sometimes had to go there. One day, as the horse stood quietly at the edge of the forest, it saw something unusual. A young girl appeared. She looked kind and gentle, not like the humans who sometimes harm the forest. She carried a clay pot, and with careful steps, she walked to the pond to fill it with water. Her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes were soft and warm. When she saw the horse watching her from a distance, she smiled. The horse felt something strange, a need to protect her. Though they had never spoken, there was a silent bond between them. Each time she came to the pond, the horse watched over her from a safe distance, making sure she was unharmed. But danger was always near. The lion had noticed her too. The peaceful days in the forest were beginning to change. The horse could feel it. Something was coming, something that would disturb the quiet life of the hermit, the animals, and the mysterious girl. And deep in its heart, the horse made a silent promise. If the lion ever hurt the ones he cared about, he would find a way to stop him. Little did the horse know, that promise would soon be tested. The sun peeked through the tall trees, bathing the forest in a soft golden light. Birds sang. and the rustling leaves filled the air with a gentle melody. In a small clearing, a hermit sat cross-legged, deep in meditation. His life was simple and peaceful, devoted to prayer and the beauty of nature. Nearby stood his closest companion, a horse with a shiny brown coat and kind, intelligent eyes. The hermit had raised the horse like a son, caring for it with love and trust. Over time, the two formed a bond stronger than words could express. The hermit opened his eyes and smiled at the horse. He stood and walked over, gently patting its neck. "Today, my friend, we need food and water," he said softly. "The forest provides, and I trust you to gather what we need." The horse nuzzled his hand, ready to fulfill its duty. It carried a small cloth bag around its neck to collect food, and without delay, it set off into the fore. As the horse moved through the trees, its friends quickly joined in. A playful monkey swung from a branch and landed on the horse's back. A group of rabbits hopped out from their burrows, excited to see their friend. A wild dog wagged its tail and trotted alongside. Birds chirped happily as they flew above, adding music to the journey. Together they roamed the forest, gathering berries, herbs, and seeds. The monkey plucked fruit from high branches, the rabbits dug up fresh greens, and the birds carried seeds in their beaks. They filled the bog with food, all working as a team, under the horse's gentle guidance. With most of their tasks done, only one thing remained: fetching water from the pond. But the pond was dangerous. It lay near the lion's territory, and the lion was a fearsome predator. His roar could send every creature in the forest running in fear. The horse paused on the path to the pond. The forest grew quiet, and even the playful monkey looked worried. "Are you sure you want to go?" the monkey asked nervously. "The lion has been near the pond recently." The horse didn't waver. That morning, the hermit had spoken to it with calm faith. "The pond is dangerous," he had said, "but I trust your courage and wisdom. Be careful." The horse knew the hermit depended on it. The water was vital, and the hermit had no one else to rely on. Taking a deep breath, the horse nodded and continued down the path. Before it reached the pond, the horse stopped and turned to its friends. Its gaze seemed to say, "Wait here. I will return soon." The monkey, rabbits, and dog watched in silence as their brave friend walked on. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds stopped singing. Step by step, the horse approached the pond, its heart steady but watchful. In the distance, the water shimmered under the sunlight, calm and inviting. But the horse knew that danger lurked nearby. With quiet determination, the horse prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The hermit trusted it. Its friends believed in it, and the horse would not fail them. The horse trotted through the forest, each step steady but filled with tension. The trees around him seemed to whisper, but he paid little attention. He had a job to do. He was on his way to the pond to fetch water for the hermit. The sun peeked through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. But there was something in the air that made the horse uneasy. He had been to this pond many times, but today it felt different. The lion's presence, a constant threat, loomed in his mind. As he neared the pond, the horse felt a shiver run through him. He could sense the lion nearby, but he had a task to complete, and he couldn't let fear stop him. He moved forward, cautiously but with purpose. At the edge of the pond, the horse spotted the girl. She was bent over, preparing to fill her water pot. She noticed the horse right away, and without speaking, she smiled at him. The horse felt a quiet comfort in her presence. They had met before, on rare occasions when the girl came to the pond to fetch water. Though they never exchanged many words, there was a special connection between them, one built on shared moments of peace in the wild forest. The girl saw the horses struggle to carry the pot, and without hesitation, she stepped forward to help him. She filled the pot with water, her hands gentle and kind. The horse stood still, watching her, grateful for her kindness. In that quiet moment, their bond deepened. There were no words needed, only the shared understanding between them, a bond of respect and quiet companionship. But suddenly, a loud, terrifying growl cut through the air. The hair on the horse's neck stood up as he turned toward the sound. From behind the trees, the lion emerged. His eyes glowed with hunger, and his mighty roar shook the earth. The girl, sensing the danger, stepped between the lion and the horse. Her courage was clear, but the horse knew the lion was too powerful. The lion's growl grew louder, and he pounced. The girl stood her ground, but there was no way to stop the lion's strength. In a terrifying instant, the lion lunged at her and swallowed her whole in one swift motion. The horse was frozen, unable to act in time. The world around him seemed to freeze as the lion turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving behind a silence that felt deafening. The horse stood there, his heart pounding, his body trembling. He had barely escaped the lion's attack, but it was the loss of the girl that hurt the most. With a deep, painful breath, the horse turned and slowly walked away from the pond. His body was scratched and bruised, but the emotional pain was much worse. As he made his way through the forest, the animals who lived there, his friends, watched him closely. They could tell something was wrong, but the horse didn't stop to explain. He kept walking, his eyes distant, his mind filled with the girl's last moments and the cruel attack that had stolen her life. When the horse finally reached the hermit's home, the old man immediately noticed his distress. He rushed over, seeing the fresh wounds on the horse's side. "You're hurt," the hermit said gently, touching the horse's side. "What happened, my friend?" But the horse didn't answer. He stood quietly, too heartbroken to speak. The hermit carefully tended to the wound, but the pain the horse felt inside was something no bandage could fix. That night, as the horse lay down to rest, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl, the bravery she showed, and how everything had ended so suddenly. He had failed to protect her, and that was a weight he couldn't carry. But deep inside, something began to stir, a feeling that he couldn't ignore. He couldn't let the lion's cruelty go unpunished. For the first time, the horse knew what he had to do. Days passed since the tragic event at the pond, but the horse couldn't find peace. His spirit, once filled with strength and purpose, was now broken. The weight of the girl's death and the helplessness he had felt in the moment consumed him completely. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her fall into the lion's jaws, and it haunted him in the silence of the forest. The horse, once a noble and compassionate creature, now walked through the forest as if in a daze. He no longer greeted his friends, no longer interacted with the monkeys, rabbits, or the birds. His once joyous neighs and gallops were replaced by a hollow silence. The other animals noticed the drastic change in him. They saw the sadness in his eyes, the slump in his posture, the way he no longer cared for the things he once loved. The forest, which had always been a place of life and harmony, now felt colder. The usual sounds of birds singing and animals playing seemed distant, as if the trees themselves were mourning. The horse's grief weighed heavily on the entire forest. One afternoon, the rabbits approached the horse, their small eyes full of worry. They hopped close to him, their usual cheerfulness nowhere to be found. "Horse, why won't you talk to us?" one of the rabbits asked softly. "You've been so quiet, and we miss your company." But the horse only turned his head, his gaze lost and distant. He didn't have the energy or the heart to respond. The sadness in his chest was too thick to put into words. He had failed to protect the girl, and that was something he could never forget. The monkeys, who were usually full of playful energy, swung from the trees and approached cautiously. "We miss the way you used to run with us through the forest," one of them said. "What's happened to you?" The horse simply shook his head, unable to express the heavy sorrow he felt. His once energetic nature had been replaced by a quiet despair, a feeling that seemed to seep into the very ground beneath his hooves. He was alone, even though he was surrounded by the animals who cared for him. The hermit, too, noticed the change in his beloved horse. He could see the deep sadness in the horse's eyes and the way he had withdrawn from everything. The hermit, though wise and patient, felt a pang of sorrow for the horse. He had raised the horse as his own child, and now, seeing him in such pain, tore at his heart. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall trees, the hermit sat beside the horse, his weathered hands resting gently on the horse's mane. The light of the setting sun cast a warm glow over the two of them, but the horse's sadness made the light seem dimmer. "I see the weight you carry, my friend," the hermit said softly, his voice calm but filled with concern. "You feel the loss of the girl deeply, and you blame yourself. But grief, though heavy, is a part of life." The horse lifted his head slightly, his eyes empty of emotion. The hermit continued, "Life and death are two sides of the same coin. The girl's time had come, but you cannot carry the burden of that. You mustn't let your grief turn into anger, or it will consume you. The forest needs you. You need to find peace." The horse listened, but the words didn't reach him. The hermit's wisdom was gentle and kind, but the horse's heart was too full of grief and guilt to absorb it. He had failed to protect the girl, and the lion's cruelty still burned in his mind. The hermit saw the turmoil in the horse's eyes and understood that the pain ran deeper than just the loss of the girl. The horse had always been a protector, and now he was unable to protect anyone. That failure was eating away at him, fueling his desire for revenge. As the days passed, the horse's grief began to twist into something darker. He couldn't shake the image of the lion, the beast that had caused the girl's death and ruled the forest with terror. The lion was a constant threat, but the horse had never felt so powerless before. The hermit's gentle words couldn't soothe the fire that had ignited in the horse's heart. He could no longer bear the lion's dominance, nor the memory of the girl's life being taken so ruthlessly. The forest, once a place of peace, now felt suffocating. The horse had been a beacon of strength and compassion, but now, all he could think about was how to rid the forest of the lion's cruelty. His sense of justice had been clouded by anger, and he could no longer see the balance the hermit spoke of. That night, as the moon rose high in the sky, the horse stood at the edge of the forest, staring into the distance. His mind was set. He knew what he had to do. The animals who had once been his friends, his companions in the forest, didn't understand. They could see the darkness in his eyes, but they didn't know what to do. They had lost the horse they once knew, the brave, kind, and compassionate friend who had always stood by their side was now a creature filled with rage and pain. The hermit, too, sensed that the horse was slipping further away from the path of peace. He had done everything he could to comfort the horse, but he could not force him to let go of his anger. The horse's need for justice had consumed him, and the hermit feared that he was on the brink of a dangerous path. "Please, my friend," the hermit whispered into the night, "find your peace before it's too late." But the horse couldn't hear him. He was already lost in his own grief, and he could no longer see the forest as it once was. All he could see was the lion. The moonlight filtered softly through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The horse stood at the edge of the forest, his gaze fixed on the dark silhouette of the distant pond, where the lion lurked. He had spent many sleepless nights in thought, and now his mind was clear. His grief had transformed into a singular purpose. He could no longer live with the lion's reign of terror over the forest. The peace that had once thrived here was being smothered by fear, and it was his duty to restore it. The horse knew he had to take action, but he also knew that confronting the lion directly would be a dangerous challenge. The lion was a powerful predator, a creature who struck fear into every animal that crossed his path. But the horse was no longer the same. The deep wound in his heart had driven him to a place where his sense of justice burned stronger than his fear. He could not allow the lion's cruelty to continue, not after what had happened to the girl and to him. So that night, the horse gathered his forest friends in a secluded glade. He stood before them, his posture firm, his expression serious. The time had come to put his plan into motion. "We've all suffered under the lion's rule," the horse began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "But no more. I've thought long and hard, and tonight I have a plan to rid the forest of his cruelty once and for all." The animals listened intently, their eyes wide with curiosity and concern. They had seen the horse's sadness, and they had watched as he grew more determined each day. Now, they could sense the urgency in his voice. The horse had always been their leader, their protector, but now they saw something different in him, something darker. The horse continued, "I will need each of you to play a part in this. We must work together if we are to succeed." The monkeys, swift and agile, would be the eyes and ears of the operation. They were the perfect scouts to track the lion's movements and warn the others when he was near. The horse explained the monkey's role in the plan. "You'll follow the lion. Watch his every move. We need to know his patterns, where he goes, and when he's at his most vulnerable. You're fast and quiet. You must be our eyes in the shadows." The monkeys nodded, their eyes gleaming with determination. They had been witness to the lion's terror, just like the horse. They were eager to help bring an end to his reign. Next, the birds would be crucial. Their role was simple but vital: distraction. "We need you to keep the lion busy, to divert his attention when the time comes," the horse explained. "Your speed and ability to fly will give us the edge we need. You'll confuse him, make it harder for him to focus on the task at hand." The birds chirped in agreement, flapping their wings with excitement. They had always been the messengers of the forest, and now they would be part of something much larger, a mission to reclaim the peace they once had. The rabbits, known for their quick thinking and resourcefulness, would lay traps around the lion's territory. "You will dig, set snares, and create obstacles. The lion is strong, but his pride will make him arrogant. If we can slow him down, we'll have a chance to defeat him," the horse instructed. The rabbits, small but cunning, were eager to play their part. Finally, the horse turned his gaze to the trees, where the hermit often meditated. "I will go alone to confront the lion. This is my responsibility," he said quietly, more to himself than to the animals. But there was no turning back now. His mind was made up. While the horse shared the broad strokes of the plan with his friends, he kept the final details to himself. He couldn't bear to share the full extent of his strategy with anyone. This was something he needed to do on his own, a personal mission, driven by the deep guilt he felt over the girl's death. The horse knew that his actions would not only change the fate of the forest, but could also come with great consequences for him personally. The plan would require the animals to act in perfect harmony. They would have to trust one another and work together to create the perfect moment to strike. The horse's heart pounded with the weight of the responsibility. There was no room for failure. As the horse finished explaining his plan, the animals all agreed to their roles. They knew the danger, but they also knew that the lion's cruelty could no longer be ignored. The forest had been living in fear for too long. The monkeys scurried into the trees, their nimble bodies disappearing into the branches. The birds flew off into the sky, their wings slicing through the night air. The rabbits hopped away, disappearing into the underbrush to prepare their traps. Every creature in the forest had a role to play, and each one was willing to risk everything for the sake of peace. As the animals dispersed to carry out their roles, the horse remained in the glade, his mind focused on what lay ahead. He had not shared the full details of his plan with the hermit, and part of him was relieved by that. The hermit would never approve of such a dangerous course of action. He would try to stop him, just as he had tried to stop him from seeking revenge before. But the horse knew that he could no longer ignore the lion's cruelty. The hermit had always been a guiding light for the horse. He had raised him with love and wisdom, teaching him compassion, patience, and understanding. But this time, the horse's heart was set on something else. He was no longer the young, hopeful creature who had once roamed the forest with his friends. He had become a different being, a creature of justice, but also of anger. As the horse began to walk away from the glade, he heard the hermit's voice calling out to him from the forest. "Wait, my friend," the hermit said, his voice filled with worry. "What are you planning to do? I see the fire in your eyes, but I fear that the path you walk will only bring more pain." The horse paused, his heart heavy with the weight of the hermit's words. He knew that the hermit was right. Revenge would never bring peace. But the lion's reign had to end. The horse's resolve was firm. "I must do this, hermit. For the forest, for the girl, for us all," the horse replied, his voice steady but filled with a deep sorrow. The hermit didn't speak another word. He only watched as the horse disappeared into the night, his silhouette fading among the trees. As the plan took shape, the forest held its breath. The final confrontation between the horse and the lion was coming. The stage was set, and there was no turning back. The horse had made his decision, and he was ready to face the consequences, whatever they might be. The air was thick with anticipation as the horse stood at the edge of the pond, his heart pounding with a mixture of resolve and sorrow. This was the moment he had prepared for, the moment he had been both dreading and longing for. Tonight, the forest would either be freed from the lion's tyranny, or it would be plunged deeper into darkness. The weight of what was to come pressed heavily on his mind, but he knew he had no choice. His friends, monkeys, birds, rabbits, were positioned around the pond, ready to carry out their parts of the plan. The monkeys hung in the trees, their eyes sharp and alert, watching for any sign of the lion's approach. The birds circled above, their wings slicing through the stillness of the night. The rabbits crouched low, their bodies hidden among the tall grass, waiting for the right moment to spring their traps. The forest was alive with quiet activity, each animal playing its part in the elaborate plan. The horse's eyes were fixed on the horizon. It wouldn't be long now. The lion, confident and arrogant, would soon come to the pond for his nightly hunt. The horse's heart tightened with each passing second. It had taken all his strength, all his courage, to get to this point. But there was no turning back now. He had promised to free the forest from the lion's reign of terror, and he intended to keep that promise. As if on cue, the lion's unmistakable silhouette appeared at the edge of the pond, his massive form moving through the shadows like a dark storm. The forest held its breath. The horse gave a single nod, and the monkeys sprang into action. They scurried from tree to tree, creating a ruckus in the branches above the lion, throwing rocks and making noise to distract him. The lion, startled, roared in frustration and turned in their direction, his eyes flashing with fury. Meanwhile, The birds swooped down in a coordinated flurry, their bright feathers flashing in the moonlight. They cawed loudly, darting around the lion's head, distracting him further, clouding his vision. The lion swiped at them angrily, his claws swiping through the air. But the birds were too fast. They flitted just out of reach, their chaotic flight throwing him off balance. The rabbits, hidden in the grass, moved quickly to set their traps. They had dug small pits near the lion's path, covering them with branches and leaves. As the lion charged forward, enraged by the distractions, his paw sank into one of the pits, and he stumbled, momentarily thrown off balance. This was the moment the horse had been waiting for. The horse lunged from his hiding spot, his powerful legs propelling him forward. He charged straight at the lion, who had just recovered from the pitfall. With a mighty roar, the lion swung his enormous claws toward the horse. The horse deftly sidestepped the attack, his hooves kicking up dirt as he slid to a stop, narrowly avoiding the lion's deadly strike. The battle was fierce and brutal. The lion's strength was unmatched, but the horse's speed and intelligence gave him an edge. The horse's heart raced as he ducked and dodged, using his agility to outmaneuver the lion at every turn. Each time the lion lunged, the horse was there to evade the attack, countering with quick, precise strikes of his own. The forest animals from their hidden positions continued to assist. The monkeys swung down from the trees, pelting the lion with stones and twigs to keep him distracted. The birds swooped low, diving in front of the lion's face, confusing him further. The rabbits, in the background, continued to dig more traps, setting them along the lion's path. The lion, furious, swiped at the horse, catching his shoulder with one of his massive claws. The horse winced in pain, but refused to back down. Blood stained his coat, but his determination only grew stronger. He had promised to free the forest, and nothing, not even this ferocious beast, would stop him. With a sudden surge of energy, the horse used the momentum from one of the lion's failed strikes to twist around and deliver a powerful blow to the lion's side. The lion staggered, his balance faltering for just a moment. That was all the horse needed. With a swift, calculated move, he lunged forward, knocking the lion to the ground, with a force that took both of them by surprise. The lion roared in pain and fury, but the horse didn't relent. He pinned the lion to the ground with his hooves, his eyes locked on the beast's. The forest animals, watching from their hiding places, cheered silently in their hearts. They had done it. The lion was on the ground, vulnerable. The battle between the two mighty creatures was far from over, but the horse's victory was nearly complete. He pushed with all his might, using his strength and the momentum from the battle to overpower the lion. The lion struggled beneath him, but the horse's resolve was unshakable. He knew this moment would come, and he wouldn't waste it. With one final decisive push, the horse drove the lion into the earth, his hooves striking with the force of a thunderclap. The lion let out a strangled roar, his body stilling as the weight of the horse pinned him to the ground. The battle was over. The forest was silent. The once feared predator lay defeated, and the land that had lived in fear for so long began to breathe again. The forest animals cautiously approached the scene, their eyes wide with awe and relief. The horse stood tall above the fallen lion, his chest heaving with exertion and his body wounded but victorious. The horse stood there for a moment, his eyes fixed on the lion, not out of hatred, but out of the need for closure. He had done what he set out to do, not just for the forest, but for the girl who had sacrificed herself. Her memory lingered in the horse's heart, and though he had defeated the lion, he couldn't escape the grief that weighed on him. The animals gathered around the horse, their faces filled with gratitude and admiration. The monkeys swung from tree to tree, chattering in excitement. The birds sang loudly, their joyful calls echoing through the forest. The rabbits hopped around, their ears twitching with happiness. The forest had been freed, and the weight of fear had been lifted. But the horse remained distant. He nodded quietly to his friends, acknowledging their support, but his eyes were far away. He had achieved victory, but it felt hollow. The memory of the girl's death haunted him, a constant shadow in his mind. Her sacrifice had not been in vain, but the pain of it remained. As the celebrations carried on, the horse walked away from the crowd, his steps slow and heavy. He needed time to reflect, to come to terms with what had happened. The forest was safe now, and the lion was gone. But the road to healing would take longer. The horse stood alone beneath the trees, looking out over the pond. The moon reflected off the still water, and for a moment, everything was at peace. But in his heart, the journey was far from over. The forest had been freed from the lion, but the battle within him was just beginning. The horse walked slowly to the pond, his hooves heavy with sorrow. The moonlight reflected off the still water, casting long shadows on the ground. It was here, at this very spot, where the girl had died, where her life was taken by the lion. The horse's heart ached as he recalled her sacrifice, how she had shielded him from the lion, only to be lost in the process. He had thought that defeating the lion would bring peace, but instead, it had only brought more pain, a deep, gnawing guilt that he couldn't shake. He stood at the water's edge, staring at the reflection of the moon. Was this what justice looked like? Was this what it meant to truly protect the forest? The lion's death had restored order, but at what cost? The girl was still gone. He could still hear the echo of her screams in his mind, see the image of her bloodied body before him. She had given her life for him, and now he felt as though he had taken another life in return, just to avenge her. The weight of the hermit's teachings hung over him now. He had often spoken of compassion, of how violence could never bring true peace. The hermit had taught him that life was precious, that every act of harm to another being rippled through the world, affecting everything in its path. The horse had only acted out of a desire for justice, yet in his pursuit of revenge, he had only deepened the forest's suffering. He could still hear the hermit's voice, soft and gentle, yet full of wisdom. True justice lies not in revenge, but in the courage to face the pain of loss and choose peace. The horse's chest tightened with the burden of those words. His heart was heavy, filled with regret. He had tried so hard to make things right, to defeat the lion, to restore the peace that had been broken. But now, standing here, he realized that true peace could never come from violence. The act of revenge had not healed him. It had only made the wound deeper. The guilt was too much to bear. He had already sacrificed so much in this battle. And now, in the quiet of the night, it felt as though the only way to truly atone for his actions was to sacrifice himself. Without a second thought, the horse stepped into the water, his body moving toward the depths of the pond. It was the place where the girl had died, and now it was the place where he would let go of the burden of his guilt. As the water rose around him, he closed his eyes, letting the coolness wash over him. He did not fear death. He feared living with the weight of his actions forever. As the horse sank deeper into the pond, he felt something shift inside him, something that had been broken, now mending. His spirit, full of regret, sought redemption. The water seemed to embrace him, a quiet acceptance of the sorrow he carried. And then, with a final breath, he let go. His body sank, and his spirit, free from the torment of guilt, left the forest forever. The hermit stood on his hillside, gazing at the stars. He had felt the change in the air, the shift in the forest's energy. It was as though something deep within the land itself had shifted. The horse was gone. The hermit's heart ached with the loss, but he understood. He had always known that the horse's journey was not just about battling the lion. It was about learning, about understanding the true meaning of justice, peace, and sacrifice. The hermit had watched the horse's transformation from a creature driven by anger and a thirst for revenge to one who had come to understand the deeper truths of life. It was a painful journey, but one that had led the horse to his final act of redemption. The hermit bowed his head, his eyes filled with sorrow, but also with a quiet respect for the horse's choice. The animals of the forest gathered at the pond, their faces filled with grief. They had witnessed the horse's bravery and his sacrifice, and now they mourned him. The monkeys, the birds, the rabbits, they all gathered around the pond, their hearts heavy with the loss of their friend, their hero. The forest would never be the same without him. In silence, the hermit planted a tree by the pond, its roots deep in the soil, its branches reaching toward the sky. The tree would stand as a living memorial to the horse, to the girl who had sacrificed herself, and to the lessons they had all learned. It would be a symbol of peace, justice, and the cycle of life. Life and death were intertwined, and every loss carried with it the potential for new growth, new understanding. The hermit stepped back, his eyes never leaving the tree. He spoke softly to the wind, his voice carrying the wisdom of a life spent in reflection. True justice lies not in revenge, but in the courage to face the pain of loss and choose peace. And with that, the hermit turned and walked away, knowing that the forest would heal in its own time, that life would continue as it always had. The horse's legacy would live on, not in the battles fought, but in the peace that came from choosing compassion over violence, from seeking redemption over revenge. The forest would remember, and the cycle of life would continue. And so, the horse's journey comes to a heartbreaking end, one of sacrifice, redemption, and the powerful truth that true justice isn't always what we expect. His story serves as a reminder that revenge may come at a cost, and redemption often requires the greatest sacrifices. The forest, forever changed by his courage, now knows peace. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If you were moved by this story, please like, comment, and share it with others. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the horse's sacrifice. Was it worth it? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch your soul and challenge your heart. See you next time.